Good morning, students. We are doing politics of planned development. Today we will do about land reforms that was done in almost third 5-year plan. So let's start. In the agrarian sector, this period witnessed a serious attempt at land reforms. Perhaps the most significant and successful of these was the abolition of the colonial system of zamindari. This bold act not only released land from the clutches of a class that had little interest in agriculture, it also reduced the capacity of landlords to dominate politics. Attempts at consolidation of land, bringing small pieces of land together in one place so that the farm size could become viable for agriculture, were also fairly successful. But the other two components of land reforms were much less successful. Though the laws were made to put an upper limit of ceiling to how much agricultural land one person could own, people with excess land managed to evade the law. Similarly, the tenants who worked on someone else's land were given greater legal security against eviction. But this provision was rarely implemented. It was not easy to turn these well meaning policies on agriculture into genuine and effective actions. This could happen only if the rural landless poor were mobilized. But the landowners were very powerful and wielded considerable political influences. Therefore, many proposals for land reforms were either not translated into laws, or when made into laws, they remained only on paper. This shows that economic policy is part of the actual political situation in the society. It also shows that in spite of good wishes of some top leaders, the dominant social groups would always effectively control policy making and implementation. Today we will discuss about green revolution also. In the face of the prevailing food crisis, the country was clearly vulnerable to external pressure and dependent on food aid, mainly from the United States. The United States, in turn, pushed India to change its economic policies. The government adopted a new strategy for agriculture in order to ensure food sufficiency. Instead of the earlier policy of giving more support to the areas and farmers that were lagged behind, now it was decided to put more resources into those areas which already had irrigation, and those farmers who were already well off. The argument was that those who already had the capacity could help increase production rapidly in the short run. Thus, the government offered high yielding variety seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and better irrigation at highly subsidized price. The government also gave a guarantee to buy the produce of the farmers at a given price. This was the beginning of what was called the Green Revolution. The rich peasants and the large landholders were the major beneficiaries of the process. The Green Revolution delivered only a moderate agricultural growth, mainly a rise in wheat production, and raised the availability of food in the country, but increased polarization between classes and regions. Some regions like Punjab, Haryana, and Western Uttar Pradesh became agriculturally prosperous while others remained backward. The Green Revolution had two other effects. One was that in many parts, the stark contrast between the poor peasantry and the landlords produced conditions favorable for left-wing organization to organize the poor peasants. Secondly, the Green Revolution also resulted in the rise of wheat is called the middle peasant sections. These were farmers with medium-sized holdings who benefited from the changes and soon emerged politically influential in many parts of the country. Now we will see what were the later developments that happened in Indian economic system and Indian polity. The story of development in India took a significant turn from the end of 1960. You will see how after Nehru's death, the Congress system encountered difficulties. Indira Gandhi emerged as a popular leader. She decided to further strengthen the role of the state in controlling and directing the economy. The period from 1967 onwards witnessed many new restrictions on private industry. 14 private banks were nationalized. The government announced many pro-poor programs. These changes were accompanied by an ideological tilt towards socialist policies. This emphasis generated heated debates within the country among political parties and also among experts. However, the consensus for a state-led economic development did not last forever. Planning did continue, but it was significantly reduced. Between 1950 and 1980, the Indian economy grew at a sluggish per annum rate of 3 to 3.5%. In view of the prevailing inefficiency and corruption in some public sector enterprises and the not so positive role of bureaucracy in economic development, the public opinion in the country lost the faith it initially placed in many of these institutions. Such lack of public faith led the policymakers to reduce the importance of the state in India's economy from 1980s onward. Here we will discuss about food crisis in India. The agriculture situation went from bad to worse in the 1960s. The rate of growth of the food grain production in the 1940s and 1950 was barely staying above rate of population growth. Between 1965 and 67, severe drought occurred in many parts of the country. As we shall study, as we have studied, there were periods when country faced two wars and foreign exchange crisis. All this refused, sorry, all this resulted in a severe food shortage and famine-like condition in many parts of the country. It was in Bihar that food crisis was most acutely felt as the state faced a near famine situation. The food shortage was significant in all districts of Bihar, with 9 districts producing less than half of their normal outputs. 5 of these districts, in fact, produce less than one third of they produced normally. Food deprivation subsequently led to acute and widespread malnutrition. It was estimated that the calories intake dropped from 2200 per capita per day to as low as 1200 in many regions of the state. Death rates in Bihar in 1967 was 34% higher than the number of deaths that occurred in the following years. Food prices also hit a high in Bihar during the year. Even when compared with other North Indian states, for wheat and rice, the prices in the state were twice or more than their prices in more prosperous Punjab. The government has zoning policies that prohibited trade of food across state. This reduced the availability of food in Bihar dramatically. In situations such as this, the poorest section of the society suffered the most. The food crisis had many consequences. The government had to import wheat and had to accept foreign aid, mainly from the US. Now, the first priority of the planners was to somehow attain self sufficiency in food. The entire planning process and sense of optimism and pride associated with it suffered a setback. So, enough for today. We will discuss question answers of NCERT in our next class. So go through your book. Thank you.